Hello, I'm Ellen Madono, and I'm going to talk to you about something called the potency in our homeopathic medicine. Potency is the sort of thing that patients ask about, but it's not the primary problem for a homeopath. I'm going to talk about it because actually someone asked me about this, and it's a friend of mine. She doesn't know why I'm giving different potencies, and so she actually asked me, is this medicine strong enough for my problem? And I tried to explain to her, talking to her about it, but it was a little bit complicated and I couldn't fully explain it. I thought I'd do it right here. Now, we all know that we pay attention to the strength of the medicine. Too much of the medicine is poison. Most medicines are poison. And of course, homeopaths also pay attention to the strength of their medicines. But the thinking is so different from ordinary medicine's idea about strength of medicine. Actually, less is more. That's a strange thing to say. If you want to be understandable, less is more. Most people think if you had more medicine, or if you had more money, or if you had more strength, if you had more of anything, it would be better. Until you get to being poisonous, of course. But it turns out that the more diluted, the less there is of the actual medicine in the medicine, the stronger the effect is of that medicine. The person I'm talking to is an old friend. She goes back to my parents' and my grandparents' generation when they moved to the United States. So we share a lot in common. But I'd like to share this talk that's really for her, for anyone who's interested in homeopathy, and you don't need to have my background as a homeopath or my Japanese American background, or you don't have to share even the same beliefs or anything, but I hope that what I'm going to talk to you about is understandable. Now, she said, well, should I be doing Chinese medicine or homeopathy? What do you think would be the most effective for me? What do you think I should do? And if I want to learn to take care of myself, what should I use? My friend is not wealthy. I thought, oh, well, what is most available to you? What can you learn the most easily? And what's also effective? For me, it's always been homeopathy. I actually learned Chinese medicine also, and it taught me a lot, but homeopathy has been the most effective. And I'm in good company, I think. Queen Elizabeth travels with homeopathy and with her doctors. I don't travel with a doctor. And I bring this simple set of remedies with me. The green box was my first box of remedies. It contains 50 little of those bottles there of remedies. Over time, I've learned to put my remedies into small bags and carry them around that way. Of course, they're labeled. It's the handiest form of medicine that I know. I wouldn't be without it. I keep my family and my friends and everyone I know away from strong medicines as much as possible by using homeopathies. Homeopathy is powerful and it's strong. So homeopaths are always concerned about controlling the strength of our remedies. Okay, these things in the bags here are remedies. Why isn't it so difficult to explain what strength is about? Why is more less? I'm not sure that I can give you a complete explanation because I don't really understand all the mysteries of water, and I don't think we all do understand it, but it has something to do with the properties of water. Water doesn't act exactly like all the other elements in the world. This is a photograph of some water molecules, H2O. And you can see they're combining in different forms with other water molecules. They form what is called clusters. Well, this is a bit mysterious. I don't quite understand what this has to do with why our remedies don't exactly act the way most things in the world do, where more is always better. Less is better here, and it has something to do with things that something like water, because our bodies are made of water and we always give our remedies in water. It has something to do with the nature of water. Now, where am I going with all this? This is not just about this discussion here I'm presenting, but why am I doing this? Actually, I'm very interested in the work of Heiner Frey. He's a Swiss doctor, a pediatrician, who researched a method called polarity analysis. And this method increases the reliability of self-care. So it's a very scientific method of analysis, and what surprised me was it's very easy. I feel that even a beginner, and he actually said that, he said, I think that beginners could use this. But there's nothing up on the web introducing beginners to self-care. And part of the reason, I think, is that homeopathy is always taught without this confidence that we have a reliable way to find our remedies. Now that we do have this reliable way, I would like to provide the road to get to understanding this method and provide it for beginners. Now, my friend said, oh, I don't have any confidence. I don't know if I could learn something like that. She's over 60 years old, and it's understandable. Difficult or easy are not about, the main problem is not that something is inherently difficult or inherently easy. Of course, this method makes it easier, a lot easier, but the real problem for me has always been that it's not familiar. Homeopathy is not familiar, and actually becoming familiar with homeopathy was the most difficult part, partly because I didn't succeed. You know, I didn't have this method when I started. What made me familiar was I used it. I used homeopathy for the smallest problems, all kinds of problems. I talked about it on websites and talked to other homeopaths, and I gradually began to be pretty confident about my homeopathy, and I decided, well, no, I won't go to Chinese medicine, I'll use homeopathy. And so I went straight ahead with it. It became familiar because I used it. If you don't use it, I really don't have confidence that you can master it. You have to use it. One of the things that, the reason why my friend was so concerned about her medications, I treat her, about her homeopathic medications, her remedies, was the extreme dilutions of medicines in homeopathy. You know, all the people who say that homeopathy is for quacks and all that kind of stuff, they're all very concerned about this extreme dilution. It's not something that concerns homeopaths, but I must admit that as I was learning homeopathy, it was one thing that made me always think, oh, this can't be true. Oh, this is impossible. After all these years, I started learning around year 2000. After this many years, I'm pretty sure that the dilution is not the biggest problem in homeopathy. But I'm going to explain it anyway. And so what happens? What are we basically doing? There's an herb, or there's something that has medicinal power. It could be a poison from an animal, or it could be a mineral as well as an herb. And it is diluted in alcohol. And then one drop of that is placed in a bottle that is half full of water. And then that's transferred to another bottle, another bottle, one at a time. Okay? So it's dilution. This is a pharmacological way of diluting things. And it not only transfers the power of the original medicinal substance, the original herb or whatever, it actually increases that power. This all looks very complicated, but the truth is that we're always looking for the easier way to do things, the easier way to give people treatment, and the ease that we can give people through treatment. So it's pretty easy to see when somebody's doing something that is stressful. Even if your treatment is stressful, it's easy to see. And when the treatment is easy, it's easy to see that your treatment is the kind that you want, because this is a very practical kind of science. That's why you have to do it in order to understand it. Less is more. Come on, give me a break. that's the opposite of everything I've ever learned in life. This kind of situation is not I'm sure it's not my friend's favorite situation. She really likes things to be understandable. She said, I want a clear measurement. I want something that clearly tells me what's important. So we're diluting into water, and there's a very, very orderly way of dilution. And we count this 1C, 2C, 3C, 4C. So we have names for the different kinds of dilutions. And by diluting it, what you're doing is you're preserving the natural energy of the herb. You're also staying very, very conscious of the amount of energy that is in the remedy here. So it's really the amount of energy that's in each bottle. Okay, so we're being very clear about that. I hope my friend feels good about that. But when we dilute the remedy, the reason why we dilute it is because the body's energy that we're healing is also subtle energy. So we're getting the remedy to be like the body that we're healing. It's subtle. Okay, we're going to find out what subtle means. The standard image of the body and of medicine is fairly mechanical. Here's an image. This is a kind of a joke, but still, the basic idea of many forms of ordinary medicine are based on this very mechanical image of the body. And to reinforce that image, students learn that, for example, the cell looks like this model. Well, this model, I think, is made of plastic. It's hard, and the walls here are very thick. A lot more is crammed into the cell than this. This is supposed to be the nucleus. And it's far more complicated than this. This is a model. All of these walls are like one molecule thick. A molecule? How big is a molecule? We can't even see a molecule. The image that's here and the reality are very, 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 very different. Homeopaths assume that the body is much more subtle than a plastic model or a machine. Okay, so what is subtle energy? Okay, we're going to get into something that is a little bit harder to understand, but you understand something like this. Feeling not so good, feeling pretty good and able to think, and feeling just super are different feelings. It's something about being alive and what it feels like to be alive, right? And this is very different than being dead. I mean, when we see someone who's dead, we know that that's very different from the live experience. Okay, so this is on a very sensual level. Alive and dead are very different. But then we try to picture this, okay, and we get into all kinds of trouble. First of all, this thing about being alive is the life force, right? Some people call it the soul. And then there's their thoughts and their feelings, and then all that is called mind. And this is called body. Now, this is homeopathic language. This is how homeopaths talk. I don't totally accept this, but I want to present it to you because this is what homeopaths are taught to, is the way things are. I'm concerned about this word, whether this thing is hierarchical here. And it fits very well into Western ways of thinking, to think that indeed everything should be hierarchical, including the life force should be above the mind and the thought, feelings and thought, above the mind, above the body. Many people agree with that. Now, before we get into this subject, if you're dead, none of this is occurring. This is all irrelevant. So then the question becomes, what is energy? Now, one of the ways of measuring energy is to talk about what we can see. So up to here, the visible energy we can see. I've never seen radio waves, so I don't exactly know what this means, but the visible energy range is somewhere around here. And then how big is this energy? How big are the frequencies? Well, it says on this graph that it's around here. It's about the size of a tip of a needle, and then this gets into the size of bacteria, molecules, an entire element. This is quite a molecule is composed of elements, right? And this is the inside of nucleus of the element. I got this written in Japanese. Anyway, so this nano size in here, the size, nano is the measurement for something that's really, really small. You don't use nano for all these kinds of energy forms, okay? But nano is for things that are the size of electrons. A German physicist named Heisenberg mathematically figured out that what's called the uncertainty principle. If you're in a world where things are the size of electrons, okay, if you're in that world, then looking at it, you can know where the location is, but you won't know how fast that whatever it is you're looking at is moving. Okay, the momentum. You won't be able to, and if you know the momentum, you're not going to be able to calculate the location. And since Heisenberg, well, this is before World War II and after, I think, but after this mathematical finding was accepted, then we found out that there are particles, and there's a whole world where this is true, that you can't know both location and the speed or the momentum of an electron. This kind of world kind of turns all of our assumptions upside down. We don't, in the normal world, we don't have this kind of problem. This is the world where homeopaths think that homeopathic remedies work. Okay, they work at a very subtle level. There's a hypothesis that homeopathic treatment occurs at the nano level. A hypothesis means that we don't really have all the evidence to prove this. It's just that a lot of things that occur don't occur at the normal way of medicine. I've experienced this before, like remedy. As soon as it hits the tongue, the pain disappears. I mean, there wasn't any time for blood to circulate at the speed that the effect took place. That kind of thing it makes me feel like, oh, there's something else going on here. This is not ordinary medicine. You might say, can we experience this nano level of energy? And I don't think we really can, but we can experience some things that are a little bit closer. For instance, if you measure the heat coming off of the body with different emotions, you're going to get not only different amounts of heat, but the place where the heat is different. In the case of anger, you're going to have emotions that rise. And if you have fear, the emotions kind of shrink and your whole body shrinks, right? And if you're in danger, you're out of here. If you're happy, you're glowing everywhere. It's just when you're happy, you kind of feel this relaxation and warmth, just glowing from your entire body. And then when you're sad, it's like everything just kind of disappears, and you disappear. And then when you're surprised, you explode, and it's kind of, where did everything go? What I like here is the neutral picture, because there's very little heat energy produced in the neutral state. I think actually that it's not ideal to be always glowing in happiness, that actually being able to go to a neutral state is a sign of health. These are more energy being produced in these places, and in the neutral state there's very little extra heat being produced. This is just an area where we've noticed some energy. But is it possible for you as a person to notice energy that's outside your body? Is energy that we're talking about, is it only inside the body? If you go to YouTube, you can see people tell you how you can do this. You have to relax your eyes, and the background should be a white background. But if you relax your eyes, that you can actually see, it almost looks like taffy between your fingertips, and there's a lot more energy coming out of your fingertips than there is from the other parts of your hand. This glow, you can see it in the air when you're in natural light. So, it's the sort of thing you have to experience, and it's only meaningful in terms of, yeah, you can see energy outside your body. You can see quite a bit of energy. And furthermore, people have developed ways of photographing the energy that's coming outside of objects. And a living object produces considerably more energy than inanimate objects or dead tomato in this case. Okay, and the energy has a different quality to it. It's quite a bit different from an object like a key. And the energy coming from the body also has its own shape and form and color. So that's interesting, but I don't have that kind of camera, so I think it's more interesting to do something where you can actually see it yourself. Now, what are the images of energy that homeopaths use? Okay, this is really not very connected to homeopathy. I mean, we don't use this at all for homeopathy. We have this idea that energy is going throughout the body, and energy flowing. This is the same as Chinese medicine. If the energy flows, you're healthy. But if the energy gets stopped, someplace where it should not get stopped, like the circulation gets stopped or the nerve impulses get stopped, then you have dis-ease. You're not at ease. You're sick. Now, this is really a homeopathy kind of diagram. And I have a little bit of trouble with this diagram because I don't think it always works. And it's just an image. But homeopaths like to separate the mental, emotional, and the physical. What they're separating are the symptoms that come out of these various areas, or that seem to be more emotional than mental or more physical than mental, etc. It's okay, it's useful in homeopathy. That's how the literature is organized, so I'm not going to fight it. But actually, when you work with patients, you have to think about this life force. Life force, what is life force? We'll get to it in a minute, okay? But it's the feeling that you're alive. We don't always feel as alive as at other times, but we have a feeling that we're alive, and that's the life force. And then there's these subjective things like feeling and thought. I feel guilty. I have to control it. Or it feels as if something is stabbing me. So this is a perception. You're talking about a perception as a feeling. It could be, yeah, I feel happy also. And then there's the material body that we all talk about as cells, and the cells get destroyed, and that's why we get sick, stuff like that. So it's very materialistic, this body image. Now, what if you move this life force, you take it out from the top? You know, maybe putting it on the top itself is kind of not exactly right. Making the body so big, like in this picture here, the body is really big and the mind is the same size. Well, sometimes the mental parts of the illness are much bigger than the physical illness. You know, sometimes this physical illness is really small. It's just not, it's not very significant. And sometimes the body blows up all over the place and it overwhelms any thoughts. So you get different kinds of expression of disease. And what seems to me is the life force is penetrating all of this. It's more like this here. The life force is everywhere. And the life force gets stopped by disease. And when it's stopped, then you have a problem. But it's not that the life force is on top and the body and mind are below it. Okay? In the actual phenomena of people becoming ill. And sometimes the life force gets very small and it just seems you nothing but physical problems. And that's what the patient tells you about. So, you know, there are different ways of getting sick, right? So none of this is important anymore. And the mind is, sometimes people are sick and they have absolutely nothing going on pathologically in their emotions and thoughts. And that's very possible. And sometimes the mind and the thoughts are everything. Okay, the body is hardly in the picture. When you talk to people as patients or just talk to them in general, you find out that what this kind of energy that you can't see is understood as prayer, or it could be love or positive energy, whatever it is. This is the part that you can't see, and all of the sorts of things that I've been talking about are also things you can't see, a kind of energy that you can't see. Of course, these things can be very ambiguous. For instance, I can love my family so much that in a war situation I will kill my neighbors. Okay, so love can mean different things. So you have to be careful when you understand what another person means about any kind of energy. I don't know whether it's a thought or an emotion or this kind of energy. Metaphysical, it's called. But people vary a lot. The remedy, when you make the remedy this way, it is affecting, homeopaths think it's affecting the life force. So it will affect the mind, it will affect the body. But basically, you're not going to be able to see the energy or measure it. Or you can't measure life force very easily, I don't think. None of this theoretical. This isn't how homeopathy began way back when, in the days of Hahnemann, the founder of homeopathy. He had all kinds of herbs, and he made herbs in his laboratory. He was trying to figure out how to decrease the poisonous qualities of these herbs. There are many pictures of Hahnemann, and he was not a very rich man, so I don't know if he wore such fancy clothes when he went visiting his patients, but he certainly visited his patients, and he certainly wrote a lot of books. And he made a lot of medicines. While he was doing that, he thought about, how can I tell people how to use these medicines, these remedies? What he wrote in the most important book that he wrote was, the highest ideal of cure is the speedy, gentle, and enduring restoration of health by the most trustworthy and least harmful ways. Okay, so this was what Hahnemann wrote, Samuel Hahnemann, the founder of homeopathy. And basically, that's what any homeopath is trying to do. He was working in a day when doctors drain blood out of people in order to make them healthy. We do things that are pretty barbaric also. We don't do this as much. In his day, they had opium that was sold under the name of laudum. And he probably had bottles of opium in his pharmacy. And in the homeopathy pharmacy, we also have opium. But we dilute it in this special way that I'm describing here, right? Doctors also give opium as pills or as shots. So, things haven't changed that much. But the question then becomes, how do you control the side effects of any kind of medicine? Now, I doubt that Hahnemann rode around in this kind of a carriage, but he rode around in a carriage, and he carried his remedies with him. And one of the myths is that these remedies in bottles were jiggling all the time, and as they jiggled, they became stronger. And now I'm going to talk to you about how they became stronger and how he diluted. So how did this become true, that what less is more? How did that become true? So far, you know that you dilute the remedy to reduce the poisonous parts of the remedy. So that's what he was doing in the beginning, until he began to discover that something was happening to his remedies when he started to dilute them. And what is sold in the stores, if you go to a natural food store, you're going to find these kinds of remedies, and they're going to have a 6C or 30C or an X, 6X. They'll have these various potencies on them. The question is, what does that mean? Going over this again, the original herb is in the tincture here, and it's been dissolved in water. And this is a very tricky business if you're dealing with minerals. Essentially, you're deciding on the amount of water and the number of times that you're going to dilute. Okay? So a number of bottles you're going to use. This has to be standardized if it's going to be sold in a pharmacy. Homeopaths want to know exactly what is the strength of the remedies they're given. You can do your own dilutions, and you won't have exactly the pharmaceutical replication, but it's good enough for you to use it as a homeopathic remedy. But you have to understand how a homeopathic remedy is made in the first place. The basic idea is that there's something like ratio. This is something you learned in grade school or middle school. So 5 girls, 15 boys. If you divide by 5, how many are you going to get? 1 to 5, right? So this is the sign that's used for a ratio. And in the case of homeopathic remedies, we have X potencies and C potencies. and the ratio is different for the two. 1 to 9 is the X potency, and 1 to 99 is the C potency. So this is a set standard. If you dilute this remedy, we're going to use the X potency because that's the picture I could find, and it's to 24X. Then what does that mean? It means that you have 1 drop to, not 9 drops, to 9 drops of water. And then you repeat this, you do this process here 24 times. Right? And what'll happen, how much are you diluting it? Maybe that's your question, okay? If pretend this is a liter of water, then you're going to have, well, some molecules in there, okay? So that's how scientists think, right? They think in terms of molecules, not the color of the water. But if you do it 24, okay, so this is doing it less than 24 times. You're going to have some molecules. But if you do it up to 24 times, you're only going to have a chance of 1 molecule per liter of water if you do this 24 times, right? And that doesn't sound like a very good chance that this is going to be a good medicine. I'm going to drink 1 molecule and you think that's going to change my health? Actually, this is not the whole story. Okay, so you have below 24X, you have more molecules, then you have only 1 molecule at 24X, and then you have very low probability of any molecules past that. And we use things that are past much more diluted than 24X all the time. The previous discussion is assuming that you're making the remedy in a quart of water. I've looked for how much water is used in the dilution, but I don't find very good descriptions of that. Think about how you would make a remedy in your own home. You would never use anything as big as a quart bottle. You'd use a small bottle, merely because bottles are expensive and you don't want to throw away a lot of glass. And actually, with a very, very small bottle, you could give remedies to thousands and thousands of people, because a little more dilution never makes that much difference as long as you're following the correct procedures. The basic idea of this talk is that less is more. Even though there's a high possibility that there's no molecules in the remedy still works. And furthermore, the more you dilute and follow the whole process of making a remedy, the stronger the remedy becomes. Just dilution itself is not going to make the remedy stronger, and I'm going to discuss that in a minute. So, what happens when you get to this no molecules? Actually, you get more potency. The remedy becomes stronger. To many people, that's darn right disturbing. What am I saying? Am I saying if you throw a bottle of remedies into the ocean, all of that ocean is going to become a medicine? Well, I mean, we've had Fukushima, so we've had way too much medicine and pollution and whatnot, but that's not what's being said here. What really happens is we succosit the remedy. We slap this bottle against something hard. This is a very simple way of succussating or shaking up the remedy. And in the pharmacy, it's sometimes they actually use this kind of machine. They use much more sophisticated machines today. So in this picture, what's missing? What do you think is missing? It isn't just about dilution. It has something to do with the strange nature of water. I've actually had some experience with this kind of the power of succussating, of the power of shaking up the remedy. What happened was there was a young girl who was not very attentive, and I told her that you know, slap this remedy on something hard 10 times and drink it twice a day. But she wasn't listening to me. So she put her remedy into her water bottle, and then she ran around town the way she always does and drank water all day. So she was taking the remedy all day long, and furthermore, she was succusseting it. And lo and behold, she got very sick. She had a big fever. She came to me for allergies, and she got much more than her allergies, which I was not aiming at. But I wasn't asking her to do what she had done. She was hanging out with a bunch of friends who weren't leading a very good life. They were into drugs, and they were really not a very good influence on her. And somehow or another, by getting this high fever, common sense dawned on her, and she packed up her bags and moved to a different part of town and began a totally different life without these unnecessary friends. I can only say that having succusseted her remedy, and the remedy fit because it helped her with her allergy a little bit, but she wasn't paying attention to anything I said, so she's not the kind of patient who's going to really benefit from homeopathy, because you actually have to communicate with your homeopath, and she wasn't very interested in doing that. This succusseting, what is it about anyway? I mean, yeah, I got this cute little story here. What's happening into the water, into the remedy? Well, I told you about this clustering of H2O in water. Okay, so this is the O, oxygen, and this is the H. And this is an actual picture, apparently. The water doesn't look like this to us, right? So I don't know what kind of picture they're taking, but this clustering apparently is something that has become well known. What we all know is that one snowflake is never like any other snowflake. They're all so individual. Of course, there's all kinds of impurities in the water, but there's something about water that produces these snowflakes that are so various. And something about water that the water is somehow organized into clusters. This is actually a laboratory researcher found, was that, okay, you might have a molecule in something much less than a liter of water that you have been succusseting and diluting, but the molecules tend to collect on the glass. That might have something to do with the way our remedies act. It doesn't explain a thing to me, but the organization of this is not exactly what you would think would be the organization for ordinary medicines. Hahnemann was naturally shaking up his remedies at the back of his cart. It was only the remedies that were so diluted that were so affected. My patient here was shaking up her remedy also and strengthening it. And that's what Hahnemann recognized. So he kept, all through his life, he kept on writing and keeping records, adding to his thoughts about how this can be done, how it can be controlled. And it started out with a book about health and became a kind of what has become the Bible of homeopathy. We now all refer to the 6th edition of the Organon of Homeopathic Medicine. Okay, this is Hahnemann in his young life, I think. What's different about this is not just the dilution, but it's the succussion. And you have to succuss it every single time. So this is how you make C potencies, centesimal potencies. The fundamental idea of homeopathy is to match your remedy to the patient. It's not the kind of thing that you learn in one lesson or from a few patients. It's something you spend your entire professional life learning, striving to learn more about it. Matching the potency of the remedy to the patient is only a very, very small part of the problem, and it's not extremely important. However, it covers the basic idea here. If you have a very strong, noisy patient who's able to send out very big vibrations with his very strong vital force, then you want a remedy that has the same kind of vibrations. One aspect of that is the potency. If you have a very meek, mild, quiet patient with a less strong body, then you want a remedy that is also matching that patient, and that remedy should match that patient's vibration at the level of potency as well. This is a video that Dr. Farrokh Master put up on YouTube. If you use the word 5-cup method, you'll be able to find the video. It's a video showing you how to dilute the remedy using the 5-cup method. His daughter put the remedy in the first cup and stirred it around gently. And then she took that spoon and, without taking any water inside the spoon, she just moved it from the first cup to the second cup. Of course, there was some water on the spoon, and you can think of that as being one drop, being transferred from one cup to the next cup. And then she gently stirred it, and repeated this process to the third cup, the fourth cup, and the fifth cup. This 5-cup method is still not the same as just diluting, because she's stirring. Remember, succussion is what makes the difference between simple dilution and succussion. And in this case, she's stirring the remedy very gently, but that is equaling the succussion. And I'd like you to learn to use this method because you can effectively control your remedies. And there are many good points to this method. So the basic idea of homeopathy is to match your remedy to the patient. You choose the remedy that will match the patient. So if your patient is taking a lot of drugs, or has taken a lot of drugs, his symptoms are going to be suppressed, and he's actually not going to be able to show you what's going on with him. So that kind of patient you don't want to give strong potencies to, because actually their immune system is weakened. And if you give the right remedy, your immune system will get stronger. They'll actually have the fever or the skin problem, whatever it is they suppressed. If they just did a little bit of that suppression, it might not come back. That's possible. And another kind of similar type is the one who's hypersensitive. These are the allergic people who are very nervous. They can be very nervous. They don't have to be allergic, but they can be very nervous, very easily upset. These kinds of people, you want to decrease the frequency of remedy use, but in most cases, if they've suppressed their problems with drugs, or they're using drugs right now, you can't just give them a remedy once in a while. It has to be given very regularly. You can't even remember what drugs they took. In that case, it's much better to use the 5-cup method, because you'll be able to give the remedy frequently. You can give it 2 or 3 times a day even. You'll be able to overcome the effect of the drugs that they're taking. Another method is to use higher potencies, but in this case, you're risking overstimulating them. Kind of a rule of thumb, if you're a beginner, is start with less stimulation from the remedy, because you can always adjust by increasing the frequency of giving the remedy and the potency. Okay, those parts can always be changed. So on a different note, let's say you have a little tiny newborn baby here, and the baby's very small. He looks very weak, right? Hardly any muscles, very small. Is this baby weak? Is his vital force weak? Is that the way a homeopath would think? Now let's compare this little baby to an adult who's gone through all kinds of pollution, radiation from all his electronic devices, drugs, vaccinations, all kinds of emotional distress, and just plain old ordinary aging. These are all factors that weaken the vital force. Well, this little fellow has not gone through all that, so his vital force is quite strong. It's surprising, but you don't need to be as careful of him as you would have to be with a elderly person who's used lots of drugs during his life and who's being worn out by the process of aging. So the idea is to match the remedy to the patient. Start low to give yourself room for change. This is just a little sideline, but if you have a slow chronic problem, you can use any potency, and you're not going to, this is kind of surprising. I learned this when I was very beginning of my homeopathy. My teacher made us use only 6 Cs, which is a fairly low potency in homeopathy. But I saw all kinds of very severe mental problems being solved with a low 6C. So sometimes potency is the reason why a remedy's not working, but usually it's the remedy doesn't fit the patient, doesn't match the patient. This is another situation. This is the situation where suddenly something happens. You're wounded suddenly. You have surgery. Someone near to you and dear to you dies suddenly. You're not prepared for this, and when it happens to you, you react in a fairly superficial way. It doesn't really immediately decrease your vital force or change your reaction to your environment. In this case, you just need to give the remedy more frequently as needed, and not be too worried about it. There's something in homeopathy about remedies getting used up, and they get used up when the situation calls for more energy. This girl's going to race, so she's carrying a big, huge battery. Well, our remedies are not huge, they're very small, but when they are a higher frequency, a higher potency, they're stronger. But they still get used up. For high fevers, vomiting, bleeding, the remedy gets used up, and you need to give it in many cases. Okay? If you have a cut on your finger or your face where there are many, many small, very sensitive nerves, of course that's very painful. And so you'll need to give the remedy more often because it will get used up. Then there are these emotional mental problems. Now these I've been discussing as high frequency problems, but as I said, a 6C had a big impact on emotional mental problems that were very severe. These are the problems that my first teacher was taking care of, and I saw that a 6C was quite powerful. So it's not that a low frequency is lacking in power when there's more possible molecules in the remedy, for example, in a 6C. It's not that it's going to be less strong so much as what is your possibility for extending that strength or for adjusting the remedy? Depending on what you have, the answer to that is different. I suggest that you think about that in terms of what you have. What's possible for you at the moment with the kind of remedies you have. Okay, so if we summarize this, the high frequency emotional problems require a high frequency potency less often, but often something very low will work too. So don't give up because you don't have the high frequency remedy. I would give the right remedy. The right remedy, the one that matches the best, is the one that's going to have the most strength. Okay, matching is everything. Then we have the suppressed patient, whose immune system is suppressed, and you want to give that patient remedy more often. And a more diluted remedy, something like the 5-cup method, is a good bet for that kind of situation. Then there's the hypersensitive weak patient. And, canaries are famous for reacting quickly to environmental pollution, small birds. So you watch the small birds and insects, the small animals in our world, to look at how our environment is doing. So these weak, sensitive people need more diluted remedies, and they need it maybe less frequently. You should be more careful of these patients. I have had a very sensitive family, a whole family that's very sensitive, and they dilute their remedies 17 times. and they're very good at making these adjustments by themselves. I would say that they know they're hypersensitive, and it works well to dilute. Then there's the fast-changing recent problems. Now, these are the problems that you take to the emergency room often. And remember to take your remedies with you. Oh, I think I forgot here. You want to take it more often when you find the right remedy. But you also want to take your remedies with you on the way to the emergency room. Maybe you haven't thought out the problem well enough yet and you're not sure what to give. So just take what you have. I told you that I have a very handy set of emergency remedies. And you might start with a little box like this. Anyway, take what you have and take a book for reference. I have a little piece of paper written out here that tells me about most of the common kinds of problems. It doesn't take a whole book even. And the reason why I say on the way to the emergency room, the reason why I say take your remedies with you, even if you're a raw beginner and you don't know what you're doing, if you never try, you'll never know. And homeopathy is this sort of thing that it's better to learn it on small problems that are, even if you missed, the emergency medicine will take care of the problem. And even if your remedy didn't work because you didn't quite understand what remedy to use or you didn't know enough, by trying and thinking about it, gradually you'll get the right idea. This is how I learned. I didn't get the right idea immediately in the beginning at all. And I hope that I'm going to be giving some of you, at least, a way to be much more sure that you've got the right remedy. But in any case, it's well worth trying, because this is the road to learning. Remember when I was talking to you about difficulty or ease learning? Is homeopathy difficult or easy? The main thing is it's not familiar. It's not familiar, which means you really have to try it out. If you don't try it out, you just might never know. And I'm certainly not high-falutin homeopath. I think there are many much better homeopaths in this world. I'll give you a little bit of my experience and my insight. In my experience, the right remedy is much more important than the exact potency. Potency is very relative. So the potency that you gave before is the one the body or mind is tuning into, and it will vibrate with that potency. So the next potency you give, whether it's high or low, is dependent on what you gave in the first place. And a second, this is just my experience, and I'm not sure that you should follow that, but you can try out that. Another idea is, if you're uncertain, start low. Now this is like basic to learning homeopathy as a beginner. Don't be afraid of starting out low with low potencies, because as I said, it gives you wiggle room. It gives you more opportunity to change potency and change the frequency you give remedies. Finally, there's some common sense to all of this. You have to use the potency you have. You can't be running out after remedies for every single emergency. It's much more important to choose the right remedy than trying to match the potency to the patient. So everything I've been saying here is of fairly trivial importance. Finally, Dr. Farrokh Master, my teacher who invented this method, he invented a method that really makes it easier for beginners as well. He's not a beginner. He's a person who cures people who have cancer. His method is very good for beginners because it can overcome the possibility that you don't have many potencies. You're lucky if you have the remedy that you need and you don't have to order it. If you know that you can dilute if your potency is too high, this gives you a lot of choice, and opportunity for experimentation. If you have only a very low potency, then give it more frequency to strengthen the dose, to strengthen the effect. With this 5-cup method, you can also overcome the effects of drugs, which is, it's just commonplace that everybody is taking drugs. They went to the doctor in the first place. The doctor didn't help them. They took drugs. They're on the drugs. They're hooked. Part of your job is to help them get off the drugs, but in the meantime, you have to give them remedies while they're taking the drugs. So the 5-cup method is a gift for that kind of situation. So here again, this is the wisdom that I'd like you to take away with you. The 5-cup method is the easiest way to get around potencies. Dilute your potencies if they're too high for the patient. Give frequently to strengthen the dose or to strengthen the effect on the patient. And use the 5-cup method to overcome the effects of drugs. Thank you.